Hey there, movie lovers. Welcome back to Rocky Watches Movies. Today we're stepping into the disco era with the iconic 1977 classic Saturday Night Fever. This film, with its unforgettable soundtrack and John Travolta's legendary performance, helped shape the future of dance movies. But there's so much more to this film than just the disco balls and boogie nights. From behind-the-scenes secrets to shocking details you might have missed, we've got it all. So put on your best white suit and let's groove through 20 things you never knew about Saturday Night Fever. The film's main character was based on Vincent, from Nick Cohn's 1976 New York Magazine article, Tribal Rights of the New Saturday Night. Written in the new journalism style, the piece depicted a gifted but troubled dancer from Brooklyn's working class. The article ran with illustrations and a disclaimer claiming the events were factual, with only character names changed. But 2 decades on, Cohn admitted Vincent was entirely invented. He confessed, "My story was a fraud. I just arrived in New York and knew little of Brooklyn. Vincent was based on a mod I knew in Shepherd's Bush in the 60s. Cohn stayed on at New York Magazine, but was later indicted in 1983 for drug trafficking and conspiracy involving $4 million worth of heroin. He refused to give a testimony, and the trafficking charges were subsequently dropped. He was only given 5 years probation and fined $5,000 for possession. The film's title was initially shortened to Saturday Night, directly referencing the fact that Tony and his friends frequented the 2001 Odyssey on Saturday nights. However, when the Bee Gees submitted the soundtrack, one of the songs, Night Fever, was thought to better capture the spirit of the film. Director John Badham added the word Saturday and it replaced the original title. The film became an instant sensation upon its release in December 1977, swiftly climbing to become one of the highest-grossing films of the year. What makes this particularly remarkable is that it achieved such success despite being rated R, which theoretically limited its access to teenagers, the very audience a disco film would be expected to attract. In March 1979, the film was re-released in a PG version, with all profanity, sex and violence either removed or toned down. This revised edition earned an additional $9 million, pushing the final total's earnings in the US to over $94 million and $237 million worldwide. David Caruso and Ray Liotta both auditioned for the role of Joey. For the part of Stephanie, several high-profile actresses were in contention, including Carrie Fisher and Jessica Lange. Amy Irving also made it to the final round of casting, coming close to landing the role, before it ultimately went to Karen Lynn Gourney. Gourney was hoping for her big break in show business, and by chance, she shared a cab with a stranger who turned out to be producer Robert Stigwood's nephew. When he mentioned that his uncle was working on a movie, Gourney jokingly asked, "Oh, am I in it?" a line she used whenever she heard about an upcoming film. The nephew later submitted Gourney as a candidate, and as they say, the rest is history. Norman Wexler adapted the magazine story into the Saturday Night Fever script, and he was known for his eccentric behaviour. Wexler, who suffered from bipolar disorder, could become violent when off his medication. During one manic episode, he reportedly bit a stewardess, and in another, he threatened to assassinate then-President Richard Nixon. Most of the film had already been shot when producer Robert Stigwood asked the Bee Gees to write songs for it. They had no idea what the movie was about, yet managed to churn out a few tracks over the course of a weekend. They also repurposed several songs they had been working on, including Stayin' Alive, a demo version of which was ready in time to feature in the iconic strut sequence. According to Travolta, the cast were dancing to Bos Skaggs and Stevie Wonder while filming. With 15 million copies sold in the US alone, Saturday Night Fever became the top-selling soundtrack of all time, a title it held until The Bodyguard surpassed it 15 years later. It remains the only disco album to win the Grammy for Album of the Year and is one of just 4 soundtracks, alongside the music from Peter Gunn, The Bodyguard and Oh Brother Where Art Thou, to claim that honour. The album topped the Billboard charts for the entire first half of 1978 and stayed on the charts until March 1980, long after the so-called death of disco. No one was quite prepared for the impact of Travolta's newfound fame on the film, which was set to be shot on the streets of Brooklyn. Once word spread that Travolta was in the neighbourhood, the pavements were quickly swarmed by thousands of onlookers, many of whom were squealing teenage girls. Director John Badham also noted that there were plenty of teenage boys holding signs expressing their resentment towards Travolta for being more desirable than they were. With it proving nearly impossible to keep the crowds at bay or quiet, Badham and the crew were forced to film either in the middle of the night or at the crack of dawn. In the brief scene where Tony, his friends and Stephanie are loudly eating at White Castle, the burger flippers you see are actual employees, not actors. Director John Badham instructed them to continue as they normally would. He also gave his actors the freedom to improvise and surprise the White Castle staff in whatever way they saw fit. The shot that made it into the movie appears to show the staff reacting to Joey standing on the table and barking, but Badham revealed that it was actually in response to something else. Double J pulling his pants down and mooning the entire staff of the White Castle. When they were making the film, John Travolta's girlfriend Diana Hyland died from breast cancer at the age of 41. After filming just 4 episodes of her new role on 8 is Enough, Travolta was able to leave the set and fly to Los Angeles in time to be with her before her death, but had to return to work shortly after. The film has some Rocky connections. It was initially set to be directed by John G. Avildsen, whose previous success was Rocky. However, things didn't go as planned and he was replaced by John Badham, just weeks before filming began. Tony has a Rocky poster on his bedroom wall, and the 1983 sequel to Saturday Night Fever, Staying Alive, was directed by none other than Sylvester Stallone. About 30 minutes into the film, a rehearsal scene was originally shot to Bos Skaggs' Lowdown, with the music playing during filming, a risky move that backfired. Soon after, Skaggs' team withdrew permission, as he was considering a disco project of his own. John Badham had to redub all the dialogue, which had been recorded over the track, and find a replacement song that matched the choreography. Composer David Shire stepped in, crafting the instrumental heard in the final cut. In another rehearsal scene, Tony and Stephanie performed the Tango Hustle. This was actually something Travolta and Gourney did out of necessity. The film's choreographer had failed to realise he was supposed to be on set that day, leaving the actors without any prepared steps. Travolta's character Tony was obsessed with disco, but in reality, Travolta wasn't all that interested in the trend, partly because disco fever was already fading, at least in New York. He had always loved to dance though. He once said, "I liked black dancing better than white dancing. I used to watch Soul Train, and what I wanted to create was that Soul Train vibe in Saturday Night Fever." Travolta dedicated about 9 months of his life dancing every day to become the great local disco dancer. Best known for his appearances on Dance Fever, Denny Terrio taught Travolta many of his signature disco moves. But it was Lester Wilson, a legendary gay nightclub figure who had worked with Sammy Davis Jr. on Broadway and in London, who truly turned Travolta into a pro. According to Patricia von Brandenstein, the costume designer, Travolta wore 3 different white suits on set that she had altered to accommodate his dance moves. But after filming, one suit vanished. Another one, signed by Travolta, was bought in 1979 by film critic Gene Siskel for around $2,000. A big fan of Saturday Night Fever, Siskel later sold it in 1995 for $145,500 to an anonymous buyer via Christie's. The third suit was gifted by Paramount's president and producer Don Simpson to a friend and collector, Brian Wasserman, in 1981. It recently sold at an auction for $260,000. The iconic poster of John Travolta in a white suit, chest out and one arm pointing up and the other pointing down, wasn't actually choreographed. It was, in fact, a spontaneous moment at the end of a long day, and Travolta couldn't believe they picked that shot, and certainly never imagined it would become the iconic image that it did. There are cameos from two of Travolta's own family in the film. At the beginning of the movie, his mother Helen appears as a woman waiting for a can of paint, while his sister Annie plays the girl making pizza. A television show based on the film was apparently in development, with David Letterman saying that he was sent to an audition for the series. Then there's the musical, which premiered in 1998, directed and choreographed by Arlene Phillips. The £4 million stage adaptation premiered in the West End in May 98 at the London Palladium. It went on to Broadway the following year. And of course there's the sequel, Staying Alive, directed, co-written and produced by Sylvester Stallone. While it had Travolta reprising his role, this time trying to make it on Broadway, by the early 80s, the popularity of Travolta had declined and the disco scene had all but fizzled out. And there you have it, folks. You now know a little bit more about Saturday Night Fever. If you enjoyed the video, which I presume you did as you got this far, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos coming to Rocky Watches Movies. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.